Well, I'm back. And now on to the Walt Disney Animation Studios films I consider to be above average. In short, a 7 out of 10 or higher. So, on with the countdown.
I didn't think much of The Rescuers the first time I saw it. It was a decent watch, but not much more. On rewatch, it's still not amazing, but I liked it a lot more. I still don't think the animation looks great, but the film does have a certain amount of charm and comfort to it. The titular rescuers are likeable characters, and I like how their romance is built up over the course of the movie without it hijacking their roles in the story. Penny is a likeable character as well, and I feel bad for her situation and root for her to find a family, even when her arsehole kidnapper tells her it won't happen. Seriously, fuck that woman. I also like how the characters being animals is worked into the story quite often, and it's fun seeing the local animals help Bernard, Bianca and Penny escape during the climax, as well as the rather wholesome ending in which the latter is hailed as a hero and finally adopted. The Rescuers is a good movie overall. Hercules is a good film. That's about it. Everything I said in my Renaissance ranking I stand by, and I mostly consider it good because of the song Go the Distance, the animation, the climax, and James Woods' vocal performance. Although, I do think Danny DeVito is funnier than I gave him credit for. I've now seen the film 3 times, and each time, I thought it was a good movie. Not up there with the best animated Disney movies by a long shot, but far better than a lot of their movies. The thing that easily carries Treasure Planet the most is John Silver, a superb and layered Disney villain. I like that he's not a twist villain, and how we know he's a villain very quickly, but the protagonist Jim doesn't, and as such, tension is built up. I also like how even though John has an obsession with money, he does care for Jim, and eventually prioritises his life over the treasure from the titular planet. On top of that, the animation is fantastic. This was one of Disney's final 2D animated movies, and a lot of effort went into this part of the movie in particular. And, despite these things, the movie is quite flawed. The side characters are either bland or annoying, and the space setting doesn't really add anything to the story. As a reminder of that, the ships are just like sea ships, and the ports just like Earth ports. I personally think Disney should have done a traditional adaptation of Treasure Island, but kept the characterization of John Silver from this movie. I think my rating is a little generous here, but I think it's the relationship between Jim and John that elevates it to a good movie. Although, much like with Hercules and The Rescuers, the 7 out of 10 is much closer to a 6 than an 8. 2 years ago, I watched The Princess and the Frog for a Disney Princess ranking on my friend Sophie's channel. I stated how intrigued I was by Tiana as a character, a fast thinker, positive, and a workaholic, who has a desire to turn a rundown sugar mill into a restaurant. Though, not so much for herself, but rather to fulfill her late father's wish, and I like Anna Noni Rose's vocal performance. Revisiting the movie for this ranking, and summing it up as a whole, I like it. Not as much as I did the first time, but a perfectly good movie all the same. I like the first act the most, and how it sets up the story, and the third act is a good ending. I like a lot of the characters, but one I would like to mention is Charlotte. I like how even though she is spoiled and occasionally entitled, she does care for her best friend Tiana. I especially love how she wants a prince for the entire movie, but gives up the opportunity when she sees the love Tiana and Naveen have for each other. And honestly, when she catches the bouquet, it's warranted. I also think the movie has some good songs, particularly Down in New Orleans and Almost There. I especially like the art style of the song sequence for the latter, and as you'd expect with Disney, the animation is great throughout the movie. And yet, despite these good aspects, I don't find the stuff with the animals as interesting. Even the songs take a bit of a dive, and it does make the second act less interesting, but not bad at all. It's just mostly the human stuff that intrigues me. And while the third act is a good end, it does use the misunderstanding part, which has a predictable outcome, but I do like Tiana's decision not to take Facilia's offer in order to not dishonour her father. The Princess and the Frog is a flawed, but good movie overall. Bambi is a good movie. That's about it. It's visually appealing, with very intriguing and naturistic backgrounds, and a lot of the characters are likeable. But I can't help but feel that some parts feel rushed, the death of Bambi's mum being an example. It's one of the most famous, maybe infamous, moments in the film, but it's hard to get emotionally invested because it feels too rushed. The film really whiplashes from this really dark and sad moment to just abruptly becoming cheerful and upbeat again, and I don't think the death of Bambi's mum is ever even brought up again in the film. With that said though, I think the hunter never being shown adds to his eeriness as a villain, which not only shows that villains in society can come from anywhere at any time, but also presents a well-executed message to us about the importance of nature. Bambi is nothing amazing, but it is a good movie overall. The first 2 times I watched Tangled, I didn't think much of it, but I never actively disliked it. meaning I was willing to go with third time lucky optimism in finally appreciating it as a good movie. And it paid off. The third act still really frustrates me. They throw in all the cliches, then Eugene dies and Rapunzel is able to use magic tears to save him. How? Rapunzel clearly stated that if her hair was cut, it would lose its magic. I've heard some people say the magic is stored within her and the hair makes it easier to get to, but in that case, why can't she grow the hair back out again? It wouldn't even be a burden anymore now that Gothel was dead. But despite this, I like the first two acts a lot more. The setup of the movie is really good, and this time around, while Gothel does have similarities to Frollo from the Hunchback of Notre Dame, I forget it quite quickly, mainly because the stories go in different directions. And Gothel is an interesting villain, forced to go to evil measures to get eternal youth, and I do have more appreciation for Mother Knows Best this time around. The characters are also quite entertaining. Rapunzel and Eugene have funny and intriguing chemistry, and Maximus has a lot of humorous moments as well. And I still love the I See the Light song sequence, though I do have to question why Rapunzel's hair doesn't light up when she and Eugene sing to each other. I can now say that I do appreciate Tangled as a flawed, but overall good movie. Upon rewatch, Tarzan is actually quite good. A lot of my problems from before still stand, including Rosie O'Donnell's vocal performance as Turk, as well as the predictable twist villain, and I'm still not big on all of Phil Collins' songs, though some are better than I gave credit for previously. A lot of the emotional beats do hit harder in this one, especially the relationship between Tarzan and Carla, which is very poignant. And I do also like the romance between Tarzan and Jane. And while the twist villain is predictable, his death scene is welcomely brutal. Back when Disney didn't build up dark moments just to chicken out at the last second. And while a lot of these things are good, the way the songs are used feels unbalanced. I remember Shay Frillis mentioning this in his video, but it's especially jarring to hear Carla sing the first verse of You'll Be In My Heart, only to then go to Colin singing it. Having Carla sing the whole song, followed by a later reprise when accepting Tarzan's decision to leave, would have been so emotionally powerful. You could say the songs were the inner thoughts of the characters, but these shifts make that implication more unclear. There's also a random song number sung by Turk and the others when they wreck the human possessions. Either commit to the characters singing, or don't. Beauty and the Beast and the Lion King also have non-diegetic songs, but it's made clear that these are the inner thoughts of the characters. They even have both male and female singers to represent that. And when they do become diegetic, it's to show the side characters discussing the situation. I also don't like the relationship between Tarzan and Kerchak, and the scene where they make peace on the latter's deathbed feels so forced. I get that Kerchak is reluctant about adopting Tarzan, but then why have such a shoehorned reconciliation at the end? With all this said, Tarzan is still a good movie overall, and if I redid the Disney Renaissance ranking, which I won't need to thanks to this video, I'd put it as the new number 7. I'm really not a dog person, yet I still enjoyed 101 Dalmatians. As well as having a superb villain in Cruella de Vil and a funny henchman Jasper and Horace, it also has a lot of intriguing characters all around. I like the owners, I like the housemaid, I like Pongo and Perdita, and I like all the animals who help them when they escape Cruella and her henchmen. With that said, the puppies themselves are not particularly interesting. This kind of thing wouldn't bother me because, well, there's 99 of them. I wouldn't expect them all to have distinct personalities. But it's the fact that they try to give one of the puppies the personality trait that he's fat and always hungry, and that's all they really do with him. This kind of reminds me of how most of the others are not that distinct or unique. But this isn't a major problem. With fun chase scenes, likeable characters, and superb villains, and an interesting art style, 101 Dalmatians is fun and wholesome for all ages. I never thought much of Robin Hood as a kid, but revisiting it as an adult, I do like it a bit more. I usually tend to dislike when films and shows take a pre-existing story or concept and make all the characters animals or inanimate objects, usually because it feels like a cover-up for a lack of originality, and or because it creates a ton of plot holes. Robin Hood is an exception to this though. It feels like a fresh take on the story. The characters being animals is incorporated into small aspects of the story, even if not major, and it doesn't create any plot holes. It also doesn't take itself too seriously, relying almost solely on a light tone, unlike say Shark Tale or Chicken Little, which take themselves too seriously and also feature frequent bizarre world building that creates a ton of plot holes. As such, Robin Hood stands out as its own unique telling that actually does bring new things. I like the heroes, and the villains are also quite entertaining to watch. With that said, I do wish Maid Marian had a bit more screen time, maybe some to build up the romance between her and Robin Hood more. But it's not an unbelievable romance. And while Little John is likeable, he just feels like a clone of Baloo. Same species, almost the same design, and of course, same voice actor. I suppose another minor criticism I have of the film is the pacing can be a little slow at times. Mostly at the end, where Robin tries to trick the villains into thinking he's dead. At first, I was under the impression that him playing dead was being played obviously, but they dwell on it slightly too long, and I got the impression that they genuinely wanted to make you think he was actually dead. But again, this is a minor criticism. While nothing mind-blowing, Robin Hood is a good movie. The Jungle Book is one of the Disney films I watched the most as a kid. I think partly because my brother loved it. As such, I do have pretty strong memories of this movie. But I'm not going to let nostalgia blind me on this one. With that said, and despite the film's infamy for recycled animation, along with some of its animation being recycled, The Jungle Book is a good movie. One of my favourite parts of the movie is the music. The instrumental scores are nice to listen to, and come about at the right times, whether it be the more calming music to show the aesthetic of the jungle, or the more intense music during chase scenes. The songs also slap, particularly Bare Necessities and I Wanna Be Like You. I do, mostly, like the direction the story takes as well. Every character has some kind of role in the outcome of the story. With that said, I do feel like Car's second scene in the film is unimportant, and it plays out the same way his first scene did, except that there, it was necessary to boost Mowgli's mindset that he could look out for himself. Here, it doesn't really add anything, even if Car's song is decent. I also do wish more characters got to be active in the climax. Bagheera enlists the help of Colonel Hattie to help Mowgli, which, ironically, alerts an eavesdropping Shere Khan to Mowgli's existence. But then Hattie never appears again, and the only character who comes to the rescue in the climax is Baloo, as well as the Beatles-esque vultures who were already there anyway. With that said, I do like the friendship between Mowgli and Baloo. It's quite touching, and it manages to avoid crossing the line of becoming weird and clingy, unlike some things. And their argument doesn't feel forced or overly emotional, and I like that the movie can focus on other plot points between Mowgli running off and Baloo coming to his aid in the climax. The Jungle Book is a flawed, but intriguing movie. Fantasia 2000 is definitely ambitious, and that ambition pays off, even if it doesn't live up to the original by a long shot. There are still some pretty great segments in this movie, the Pines of Rome and Firebird Suite segments being the best of all of them. They're visually stunning, and would have fit the tone of the original film perfectly. Symphony No. 5 is a simple but striking introduction, and Piano Concerto No. 2 has an interesting combination of animation styles. And there's The Sorcerer's Apprentice, which is pretty much the same as it was in the original, so my notes of praise about it being visually stunning with an interesting story really go to that movie. Then you have the other segments, and they're not bad, but they just don't fit the tone, or the cinematic atmosphere the Fantasia films go for. They just feel too cartoony. Maybe as short films, especially on TV, they'd work better. And I'm really not a fan of the celebrity cameos. Not because of the celebrities themselves, just the annoying material they're given. But in spite of this, Fantasia 2000 is a good movie overall. Peter Pan is actually quite fun to watch. While certain aspects of the movie have aged dreadfully, mostly the infamous portrayal of Indians, there's still a lot to enjoy. The animation, as usual for Disney, looks great. The music is also really good, and suits the atmosphere of the movie. Captain Hook and Mr. Smee are great villains, and the crocodile trying to eat Hook gives a lot of good laughs. I especially love the scene in which Smee tries to give Hook a shave, but accidentally shaves a seagull's arse instead. But, unlike the film that preceded it, the adventure Wendy goes on actually means something. Not only is the adventure real, but she comes back from it accepting that she'll grow up. And Peter Pan has a good character arc of being immature and stubborn about the idea of Wendy leaving, to then accepting her desire to return, and taking her, John and Michael home safely. And overall, it's just a fun experience. Nothing amazing, but a 7 out of 10 is practically a miracle after sitting through 8 consecutive mediocre to outright awful Disney movies.
I do like Big Hero 6 more on the third viewing than I did on the second, but I still can't quite figure out why I loved it so much on my first viewing. I do love Baymax, he's hilarious and wholesome. I like the relationship between Hero and his brother, the way the film touches on themes of grief and family loss, and the arc Hero has regarding it. And yet, the movie does have flaws, particularly in its third act. The twist villain, while having understandable motivations, could have had more screen time. Perhaps maybe an establishment of his villainy in the second act. As well as this, Baymax's death is not only retconned, but also kind of pointless to the story. Could he really not have saved both him and Hero? But in spite of this, Big Hero 6 remains a good movie. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh isn't quite as good as I remember, but it's still quite a calming and charming experience, with a variety of intriguing characters. The film takes the pre-existing Winnie the Pooh short films and puts them all into a feature film. The stories have a certain charm to them, and I like how some of the characters do have interesting arcs, including Tigger realising that not all times are good for bouncing.
and Pooh's final scene involving him accepting that Christopher Robin can't be around as often, but nonetheless fulfilling a quite poignant promise to him at the end. The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is an enjoyable and charming movie for all ages. Pinocchio is a pretty good movie. While it's not mind-blowing, it is quite an interesting experience, especially given how dark the movie is, and seeing Pinocchio smoke. Believe me, you would not get away with the latter today. While I do think adult protagonists can serve as great role models to kids, I also think a child protagonist can serve that role, and I think Pinocchio works as a protagonist, as he's someone kids watching will identify with, and as he learns to be brave, truthful and selfless, and earns his reward at the end for it, kids can learn the benefits of these traits alongside him. It also has some enjoyable songs, particularly When You Wish Upon a Star and I've Got No Strings, and the animation is very nice to look at, despite this movie's strange obsession with bottoms, and one that they kept in that god-awful remake. Although it doesn't live up to what would come later, or even the movie that preceded it, Pinocchio is still a fun and charming movie. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first animated feature film ever made, but not the best one. In the lyrics to We Didn't Start the Pictures, I described Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a groundbreaking winner, and I stand by the fact that it's a winner in the field of how groundbreaking it is. The film was the first of its kind, and opened the gates for hundreds of animated films, some of which are among my favourite films. The fact that it's the first of its kind doesn't make it the best one, however. Snow White is a pretty bland protagonist, and the prince is just a plot device. The evil queen is a pretty decent villain, although her drinking the ugly potion instead of forcing Snow White to drink it is quite a strange idea. With that said, I like the film a bit more than I remember. The side characters are actually quite interesting. I like how Disney gave the dwarfs unique personalities. It's especially intriguing seeing Grumpy be, well, grumpy throughout the movie, only to later have a change of heart and be genuinely distraught over Snow White's death at the end. While the trope of a character dying only to come back has been done to death, no pun intended, back in 1937, the outcome was probably much less predictable. I also love those evil-looking eagles, and how you think they're siding with the evil queen, but really, they're just indifferent to everything, continuing to smile evilly when she falls to her death. And the animation looks amazing. It's the film that introduced Disney's iconic aesthetic, and has stood the test of time very well, even putting in details like the shine in the jewels the dwarfs mine. The songs are also quite nice to listen to, with the Hi-Ho song being the most memorable. Overall, it's a pretty good movie, and I can see why it's remembered as important historically, and deserves its place in the National Film Registry. But to me personally, it's not as amazing as it is groundbreaking, unlike say Toy Story.
Meet the Robinsons remains an underrated movie, and most of my thoughts from the Disney CGI ranking video remain intact. Despite overly fast pacing, it does feature good animation, hilarious side characters, and a fantastically executed message. I don't have much to add, so I'll reiterate my thoughts about how great the ending is. I love all the subtlety of it. Wilbur takes Lewis back to see his mother as promised, despite knowing he's risking his existence for it. While Lewis eventually reconsiders, realising that allowing himself to be taken in, he achieved a huge future and family. He's been hung on the past for so long, but ultimately learns to move forward in life, and also helps to improve Goob's future before returning to the science fair. And when the businessman tells him he has a bright future ahead of him, he sees Lucille, Bud and Franny standing in front of him, showing that his future is literally right in front of him. This is the definition of keep moving forward. Meet the Robinsons is still a flawed, but ambitious and intriguing movie. Winnie the Pooh is such a charming movie. It is more grounded in story structure than the Many Adventures, and I've heard some people say it's a little disjointed in terms of structure, but I disagree. There are 3 different storylines in the movie: Pooh looking for honey, Eeyore losing his tail, and everyone thinking Christopher Robin was kidnapped by a Baxen. But they do all link together, and are prominent throughout the movie, although the last doesn't really come in until the second act. I've also heard people complain about the short runtime, but I honestly don't care that much. I think it uses its runtime quite well, and it's hard to think of a scene that doesn't move the story forward. And honestly, it's just such a comforting movie. I love the characters, Pooh included. Pooh is a character that you just can't hate. Well, unless the public domain turns him into a serial killer. And I like that even though he is so lovable, he's also flawed and makes mistakes. He manages to be quite naive, but not to the point of becoming annoying. And over the course of the movie, he does make some smart choices, such as using the words of the book to get everyone out of the hole, and also proves to be quite selfless, giving up eating honey with Al to get Eeyore's tail back to him, being rewarded with a huge pot of honey by Christopher Robin for his selflessness. And the movie also has a lot of funny moments, my favourite one being when they all fall down the hole and Piglet has to get them out with a rope, only to cut it up and then state he cannot not.
Not?
Who's there?
Pooh?
Pooh who?
No!
But I'll let you watch the rest of the scene for itself. And it also has some good songs, my favourites being the Baxan song for its interesting use of chalk-like visuals, representing them drawing out their visions of what the Baxan does, and Everything is Honey, which has a nice rhythm, and showcases the point where Pooh is so desperate for honey that he hallucinates a world made of it, with some genuinely great animation. Winnie the Pooh is a funny and heartwarming movie from Disney. The Emperor's New Groove is one of my favourite Disney movies, primarily because it goes almost all the way with its light-hearted tone. It mostly doesn't take itself too seriously, apart from the misunderstanding part, which does take itself a bit too seriously and feels out of place. And fitting in with the light-hearted tone, the film is often very funny, the best scenes being those with Kronk, especially when he hums his own theme music while disposing of Kuzco's body. And another standout would be when Kuzco and Portia try to get to the capital before Kronk and Yzma. I also think Kuzco has a good character arc, having been spoiled from a young age and becoming entitled and selfish as a result of it. He initially seems to have no compassion for others, but then ends up showing genuine humanity, like when he, without thinking, saves Portia and then tries to deny it. Over the course of the movie, Kuzco realizes his selfishness and tries to better himself, and also provides for the people around him, including Portia's family. The Emperor's New Groove is a really enjoyable movie, with a lot of great humour and superb character development. The Fox and the Hound is such an underrated movie, and I'd like to call it an amazing movie, but there are a few things that hold it back, as frustrating as it might be. Some of the voices for the characters can be distracting, especially in how they sound exactly like characters from previous Disney movies, such as Tigger, Piglet, and the Sheriff of Nottingham. And yeah, I know it's the same voice actors, but it doesn't change how distracting it sounds. Another thing that's kind of jarring to me is when Chief falls off the railroad track bridge and they try to make you think he died, but he actually just broke his leg. But in spite of that, this is a really good movie. Pretty amazing that I considered it to be Disney's best animated film since Fantasia, 41 years prior. I would go on to rewatch better films that came out during the Renaissance period, but that's besides the point. The relationship between Todd and Copper is rather touching, and I like the way it progresses, with it becoming more complicated and conflicting as they get older. The outcome of them protecting each other in the climax is kind of predictable, but their final goodbye is poignant enough to make up for it. The relationship between Todd and Tweed is very poignant, including the love they have for each other, and that downright depressing scene in which she reluctantly takes him to the game reserve due to him no longer being safe with her. And I like that the movie has the bravery to stick to this, rather than having him return home just for the sake of a happily ever after. The Fox and the Hound is a welcomely dark and rather sad, but also very emotionally gripping movie, and it's a shame it's not frequently talked about. Frozen is still a very good movie to me, though my opinion hasn't changed too much. It still features good songs, intriguing characters, amazing animation, and smartly executed morals. I will say that I initially hated Do You Want to Build a Snowman, and I'm still not big on it, but this time around, it's not awful. And as I mentioned before, it does at least move the story forward, unlike Fixer Upper. Something I will mention that I didn't before is how relatable Elsa's arc can be, one that can resonate with people who shut people out for fear of hurting them. With Elsa figuring out how to control her emotions, in turn controlling her ice powers, and not having to shut Anna out. I can't currently think of anything else particularly new to say, but I will say that while there was a lot of hype for it for over a year after it came out, I can definitely understand that hype. Zootopia is still a very good movie to me, with well executed themes, creative world building, amazing animation, intriguing characters, and a lot of great jokes and emotional depth. Even if the flaws regarding the twist villain, nudist colony scene, and the argument between Judy and Nick still stand. I'll take this opportunity to expand on Judy and Nick's character arcs, which I think are really well handled, and I think work off each other superbly. You have Judy, the ambitious bunny cop, who wants to reduce the tension between prey and predators, and Nick, the con artist fox, who once aspired to be a cop, but faced discrimination and felt that taking the predictable path of con artist was the only option. I like that Nick initially helps Judy just to seize her evidence of him admitting to tax evasion, but over the course of the movie actually seeks to help her, seeing an opportunity to prove that he can be a good cop as well, as had been his desire as a kid. Though the argument between Judy and Nick has a predictable outcome, I like that she is shown to be flawed, with a suggestion that predatory biology is responsible for the savage epidemic, causing negativity and tension, which had been the opposite of her intentions, and an error that she eventually fixes with Nick's help. Although Judy had expressed pessimism about Nick, and Nick had expressed pessimism about becoming a cop, they both see the good in those respective people or careers by the end. Zootopia remains a stunning, funny, emotional, and thought-provoking movie. Aladdin is still a really good movie, and I stand by Robin Williams as the genie being the best part of it. As well as Williams' hilarious and energetic vocal performance, the genie is a great character, managing to work as both a comic relief side character and an important character to the story, as well as seamlessly working in a more emotional and sympathetic side to him. Well, I've said most of what I'd like to say about this film in my Disney Renaissance ranking, the characters of Aladdin and the genie, the songs and the animation. I'll take this opportunity to talk about some of the other characters. While Jafar manages to be an entertaining and quite threatening villain, there's the more likeable characters in Jasmine and the Sultan. I like how Jasmine wants to marry who she wants, rather than who the Sultan wants her to. And even though the Sultan is trying to force her into a marriage, you understand that he wants someone to take care of her when he's gone. It's a situation where you understand the desires and motivations of both characters, and the Sultan's decision to change the law so Jasmine may marry Aladdin is superb character development. Aladdin is still a really good movie, and there ain't ever been a character like Robin Williams' genie. Mulan is still a really good movie, and I stand by everything I said in my Disney Renaissance ranking video. For this video, I'll say that Mulan should be a makeup remover, given how quickly she removed her own makeup. Wow, not only did she save China, but she also showed skills in quick and effective makeup removal. And the movie still maintains the superb action scenes, characters, songs, balanced tone, and compelling themes and messages I mentioned before. A very good movie. Encanto is a fantastic movie. The writing, the voice acting, the music, the visuals, the themes, all brilliant. I find Mirabel an intriguing protagonist, one who, although disappointed in not having a power like the rest of her family, is still determined to keep the magic of her family and their house alive, and, literally, trying to fix the cracks in her family. I also like her grandmother Alma, and her desire to preserve the family magic, but ultimately coming to take responsibility for not exercising restraint in doing so. And the songs are mostly fantastic. They're mostly memorable, they move the story forward, and the aesthetic is so stunning and creative. Encanto may well have the most aesthetically creative and pleasing song numbers of any Disney movie. Encanto is a fantastic movie, and one of my favourite animated Disney movies. My thoughts on Moana haven't changed much, but it remains a fantastic film from Disney, with stunning animation, amazing music, and memorable characters. For this video, I'll go more into the arcs of the two main characters, Moana and Maui. Moana is a great protagonist, and I like how even though she is ambitious, she doesn't always know what to do or where to go, and frequently makes mistakes that she overcomes over the course of the movie. And I like how Maui had wanted acceptance that his parents had never given him, turning to immoral measures to keep it up, but eventually overcomes the trauma and helps Moana fulfill her goal. They have superb goals and superb arcs. Moana remains one of my favourite animated Disney movies. I still love Wreck-It Ralph, though I think as I've seen it so many times and put together thoughts, some even before the two viewings for this and the Disney CGI ranking videos, it's hard to think what to say that I haven't already said. It still maintains creativity, intriguing world building, likeable and relatable protagonists with superb character arcs, subtle anti-discrimination message, great humour, creative art style, and genuine poignancy, all of which I mentioned before. So, what can I add for this? I smell burning. Oh ye gods! The arcade is ruined! Shouldn't have plugged so many games into the surge, Mr. Litwalk. I'm joking. There are things about the world building that don't quite add up, but they're infrequent and far and wide, so it doesn't matter too much. The Little Mermaid is still fantastic. The animation, the characters, the music, the story, it's all brilliant. I don't really have much more to bring up that I didn't already mention in my Disney Renaissance ranking video, although I will add to my praise of the songs by saying I like the rhythm of the song Kiss the Girl and the way the scene is built up. But besides what I brought up here and in my Disney Renaissance ranking video, it's still a fantastic movie to me, and it's understandable why it kickstarted the Disney Renaissance. Most of what I said about the Hunchback of Notre Dame in my Renaissance ranking video still stands, although there is a much fatter margin between this film and The Lion King this time around. But I think rewatching The Lion King and the Hunchback of Notre Dame back to back has made me realise why the latter's tone feels so inconsistent. And it's because the dark moments in Hunchback go so hard. Not that I'm complaining, I'm glad there's a Disney film that would go that hard. And the light moments are so overly cartoony. That's why the tonal shifts are so jarring. The Lion King does go pretty hard in a lot of scenes too, and has comic relief as well, but it's not overly cartoony, especially when it does journey into more serious territory, and when they put jokes in between, they feel more natural, because they don't go too hard with the cartoony nature. As such, The Lion King can maintain a balanced tone in a way the Hunchback of Notre Dame couldn't. I said in my Renaissance ranking video that the gargoyles had some purpose to the story, though I'm not entirely sure about that. They only really take down the guards in the climax, something that Quasimodo also does. I don't find the gargoyles that annoying, but I do hate how they give Quasi false hope about winning Esmeralda, only for him to witness her kissing Phoebus. Gargoyles, you sadistic pricks, how could you? But my god, is the film amazing otherwise. It still maintains the compelling themes, fantastic music, and memorable characters that I've mentioned before. If not for the messy tone, it might be in the top 2 at least, but as is, it's a worthy number 5 spot. Fantasia might be the most timeless movie ever made. It takes a very promising concept of applying animation to classical pieces of music, and really delivers on that idea. While I do think some sequences are better than others, all of them are good at the very least, with Night on Bald Mountain teamed up with Ave Maria being my favourite one, with the dark visuals really assisting the great combination. This is one of those rare instances where it felt like Disney was leaning more towards the adult crowd than the kid crowd, but I think kids of a certain age can enjoy it too for its interesting colours and the presence of Mickey Mouse in the Sorcerer's Apprentice segment. At some point I should probably do a video where I rank every segment in both Fantasia films from worst to best. There's definitely something to say about each of them, even the weaker ones. But for now I'll say, Fantasia is a visually stunning and intriguing masterpiece that I'm praying will not be butchered by a live action remake. Lilo and Stitch has honestly gotten better with age. I liked it as a kid, revisiting it as an adult, it's amazing. The film hits both its emotional and comedic moments fantastically, feeling balanced in tone and providing so much subtlety in its emotional depth. Like how Lilo believes Pudge controls the weather, having become traumatized following the death of her parents in a storm, and Stitch reading The Ugly Duckling and learning of its message, before later feeling unwanted and coming across a family of ducklings. Lilo and Stitch are fantastic protagonists. Despite being different species, they both struggle to fit in and can be violent and aggressive at times, but they understand each other. Lilo's relationship with her older sister and guardian nanny is really poignant. You can see that they love each other, as well as the stressfulness of their situation, in that Nanny has to take care of her, as well as trying to prove herself as a good guardian to a social worker, and later having to find a new job. And there's the social worker himself, and while he could be considered an antagonist, he's ultimately just doing his job, and there are scenes where he sees the difficulty of the situation and how hard Nanny is trying to prove herself. Despite being a movie about aliens, Lilo and Stitch manages to feel very realistic, featuring characters in some very real situations, and even giving depth to the alien characters as well. Lilo and Stitch is funny, emotionally gripping, well animated, and features some fantastic characters, and just has to be near the top of the list. As mentioned in my Renaissance ranking, The Lion King, while not the best Disney animated movie, is the biggest and grandest. The animation, the music, the voice acting, the tension, it's all fantastic. There is something I want to call more attention to. I didn't talk about this much in the Renaissance ranking, but I will here, and that's the story, which is really well done. Simba has a superb character arc over the course of the movie, going from trying to shape up to be a great king, to fleeing with guilt upon being gaslit into believing he killed his dad, to realising he can't change the past, but needs to confront and learn from it to save his friends and family, to finally taking his position as the king of Pride Rock. And Hans Zimmer's music showcases this to some extent, particularly through the triumphant music when Simba runs back to Pride Rock, and when he climbs to the top of the mountain, showing how far he's come. I like how Scar and the hyenas, while all villains, have different motivations. Scar is selfish and greedy, and will do anything to keep his position as king, even when others suffer. While the hyenas merely want good food sources, so much that they'll turn to evil measures to get it. And to some extent, they both achieve their goal at some point. Scar kills Mufasa and sends Simba away and becomes king, which was his goal, and the hyenas, upon realising his betrayal of them, eat him alive. I'm not entirely sure what happened to the hyenas, but there's a chance they burned in the fire, considering they don't reappear after that. So if that happened, you could say Scar and the hyenas both achieved their different goals, but ended up losing their lives in the process. But ultimately, The Lion King teaches several great morals, primarily in how only certain situations call for people to be brave, rather than actively looking for danger, but also how you should learn from your past instead of running from it. And yeah, everything I said in my Renaissance rankings still stands. Though, admittedly, while I still hate the cover of Can You Feel the Love Tonight that plays in the movie, the cover during the credits by Elton John isn't that bad to be fair. The Lion King remains a fantastic film, but there is one better animated movie from Disney. Yep, Beauty and the Beast is still phenomenal. Despite all the Stockholm schmockholm people would like to claim, it's one of my all-time favourite movies, and my favourite animated Disney movie. And it's gotten even better on my most recent viewing. While I covered it in my Disney Renaissance ranking video, I don't want to just gloss over it. I'd like to take the opportunity to shine light on even more notes of praise, maybe even elaborate further on some of my old points, and also say that upon rewatching both this and The Silence of the Lambs, Beauty and the Beast should have won Best Picture. Something I will mention that I didn't before was Belle's relationship with her father Maurice, which, like the majority of the movie, I really like. While the town sees both of them as odd, the two support each other's interests, and when Belle takes Maurice's place as the Beast's prisoner, he frequently objects to it and then tries to get help setting her free afterwards. This should have been Disney's tweet about family being there for you, instead of this laughable misfire. A nitpick I have with the film that I should have mentioned before is how the Beast's singing voice sounds incredibly different to his speaking voice. But it's only for one verse, so it's only a minor problem. I mentioned how great the songs were in the Renaissance ranking, and I want to talk here about how great the instrumental scores are. They're absolutely majestic, and they fit every scene. The combination of eeriness and sadness to the opening theme, the build-up in the music as Belle enters the West Wing, the tension-filled music as she tries to fight the wolves, and the highly emotional music at the end when the Beast dies, only to come back as the prince, and the two get married. One you may have missed, which may be exclusive to the special edition version which I watched, is the theme at the end of the credits. Like all the other instrumental themes, it's beautiful to listen to, and the tribute to Howard Ashman is so poignant. And I'd like to second it. Thank you, Howard, for giving a mermaid her voice and a beast his soul. Your music brought pleasure to millions, and we will be forever grateful.